I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The doorbell rang at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. 3 insistent rings, as if the world were ending. I already knew who it was before I even opened the door. My son, Nathan Jackson, only ever showed up unannounced when he needed something. I left my half-full cup of chamomile tea on the kitchen counter and walked slowly down the hallway. Through the living room windows, I could see his car, a luxury SUV parked haphazardly in the driveway, taking up more space than necessary. Nathan had inherited his father's business acumen, but not an ounce of his patience or consideration. When I opened the door, he was already on his phone, a brown manila envelope in his other hand. His face, so much like his father's, was tense. "Mom," he said, walking past me without a hug, just a quick peck in the air near my cheek. "We need to talk." Nathan went straight to the kitchen as if the house were still his, despite having moved out more than 15 years ago. He sat in my chair, put the envelope on the table, and continued checking his phone while I followed him in. "A coffee would be great," he mumbled without looking up from the screen. I made the coffee mechanically. 10 years a widow, and I still served the men in my life as if it were my only function. As I placed the mug in front of him, I noticed how tense his hands looked, his knuckles white as he typed furiously. "Is Rebecca okay? And the children?" I asked, referring to my daughter-in-law and the grandchildren I rarely saw. "They're fine," Nathan responded vaguely, finally putting his phone away and taking a sip of coffee. He grimaced slightly. I always made it too weak for his taste. "I'll get right to the point, Mom. I have a problem." I sat across from him at the table. On the wall, the clock ticked by slowly, marking seconds that suddenly felt heavier. "Rebecca got herself into a complicated situation," he continued, pushing the envelope toward me. "She made some investments that didn't work out." I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were bank statements, collection notices, and a loan agreement with a number highlighted in red. 300,000. My heart raced. It was almost all of my retirement money, plus what was left from the sale of our downtown Philadelphia apartment after Walter passed away. "Nathan," I began, my throat feeling dry. "This is practically everything I have." He took another sip of coffee, his cold eyes finally looking at me directly. "Mom, it's not like you need this money. You live alone in this house that's already paid for. Your expenses are minimal." He gestured vaguely around the modest living space I'd called home for decades. "And for God's sake, you're 68 years old. What are you saving it for?" His words hit me like a slap. The house was the only valuable asset I had left, and even it was in his name. A decision Walter made years ago to avoid inheritance issues. "It's not that simple," I argued. "I have my medications, my doctor's appointments." Nathan gently tapped the table, interrupting me. "Rebecca just made some bad investments, okay? She trusted the wrong person." He leaned forward. "If we don't pay this off by tomorrow..." He took a deep breath. "Things are going to get ugly. They're not bankers, Mom." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, not bankers?" "They're dangerous people," Nathan said, lowering his voice. "What kind of dangerous people?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You don't need to know the details," he said impatiently. "Just trust me. It's a loan, right? I'll pay you back as soon as I reorganize the company finances." I stared at the envelope, then at my son's face, then at the door leading to the backyard where he used to play as a child. Now it felt as if a stranger was sitting in my kitchen. "You've asked me for loans before, Nathan. I've never seen that money again." His face hardened. "This is serious, Mom. This isn't the time for drama." He stood up, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. "I'm your only son, your family. You always said you would do anything for me." There was the manipulation I knew so well, the same one Walter used. the one I had allowed my entire life. "I need to think," I said in a low voice. "There's no time to think," Nathan raised his voice. "I need that money in my account before the end of the day. Tomorrow is too late." He stopped behind my chair, placing his hands on my shoulders. I felt their weight like chains. "Mom," he said, his voice softening, "you know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. It's for Rebecca's safety. For our family." Family. The word that always worked on me, like a magic spell that made me bend, give in, sacrifice. "Okay," I finally replied. "I'll transfer it to you." The relief on Nathan's face was almost palpable. He smiled for the first time since he arrived. That smile reminded me of the boy he once was. "Thanks, Mom. I knew I could count on you." He checked his watch. "I have a meeting now, but I'll be back tonight for dinner, and we can get this sorted out. Deal?" I nodded, unable to speak. Nathan took his phone, gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, and headed for the door. "Don't disappoint me, Mom," he added before leaving, as if I were the child and he the parent. The door slammed shut, and I was left alone in the kitchen with his half-empty coffee cup and the certainty that I had just made a terrible mistake. Through the window, I watched his car speed away, kicking up gravel from the yard I had so lovingly cared for. It was then that an idea began to form in my mind, an idea the old Evelyn Jackson would never have considered. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in a long time. "Lauren, it's Evelyn. I need your help." My friend arrived in less than half an hour. Lauren Howard and I had met in college almost 50 years ago. She went on to become a successful lawyer while I dropped out to marry Walter. She never approved of my choices, but always stayed close, patiently waiting for me to open my eyes. $300,000? Lauren nearly choked on the tea I had served her. "Evelyn, that's insane. It's everything you have." I shook my head, feeling the weight of reality. "It's not the first time, Lauren. Last year it was $100,000 for a business expansion. Before that, $50,000 to resolve a problem with suppliers. I've never seen that money again." Lauren set her mug down on the table with a clatter. "And why do you keep giving it to him, Evelyn? You've always been so smart. How can you not see what's happening?" The question hit me like a punch. Why did I keep doing it? Was it love? Fear? Habit? "He's my son," I replied, the same automatic answer as always. "And you're his mother, not his bank," Lauren countered. "Walter manipulated you for 30 years, and now Nathan is following in his footsteps. When is this going to stop?" I looked out the window at the garden I had cultivated on my own after Walter's death. The roses were finally blooming after years of trying to grow in soil that wasn't right for them. Like me, they had persisted against all odds. "Today," I replied, surprising even myself. "It stops today." Lauren stared at me, confused. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, feeling something inside me break and then mend itself differently. "I want you to help me transfer all my money to an account Nathan doesn't know about, and I want you to help me get out of this house before he gets back." Lauren's eyes widened. Then a slow smile spread across her face. "Evelyn Jackson, I've waited almost 50 years to hear you say something like that." She pulled her phone out of her purse. "I have a summer apartment in Miami that's empty. The keys are at my office. How long do we have before he gets back?" "He said he was coming back for dinner, so about 10 hours. Lauren checked her watch. "That's enough time. We'll go to the bank first, then we'll stop by my office so you can give me power of attorney in case you need legal representation. After that, we'll pack your bags, and we're out of here." I stood up, feeling a mix of fear and exhilaration. In all my life, I had never made such a radical decision. "He's going to be furious," I murmured, more to myself than to Lauren. She took my hands in hers. "Evelyn, are you afraid of him?" I thought of my son's face when he didn't get what he wanted, how his voice changed, how his eyes hardened. "Yes," I admitted, "the same way I was afraid of his father." "Then it's time to stop being afraid." Lauren squeezed my hands. "Let's go get your things." I went to my bedroom and took out the suitcase I had used only twice in the last 10 years. I opened the closet and started picking out clothes, but soon realized I didn't want to take much from this life. Just the essentials, a few outfits, my medications, important documents, and the few pieces of jewelry that had sentimental value. At the bottom of my dresser drawer, I found the small wooden box where I kept the only money Walter never knew I had. A few $1,000s I'd saved by selling baked goods and embroidery pieces over the years. My secret rebellion. I took the picture frame with my mother's photo and hesitated over the one of Nathan as a little boy. After a moment, I decided to leave it behind. When I returned to the living room, Lauren was on the phone, organizing everything. "The flight to Miami is confirmed for 3:00 p.m. We still have time to go to the bank in my office." At the bank, the manager seemed surprised by my request to transfer all the money to a new account. "Mrs. Jackson, are you sure? It's a considerable amount." "Absolutely," I replied, signing the documents. "And I need this transaction not to show up on any statement sent to my residential address." As we waited for the transfer to process, Lauren looked at me curiously. "What are you going to leave for Nathan?" I thought for a moment. "A note," I decided, "and a lesson he should have learned a long time ago." When we got back to the house, I carefully wrote a note on a piece of paper and left it on the kitchen table. "I'm the one who's disappointed. Revenge is a dish best served cold." As I walked out the door with my suitcase, I looked back at the house that had been my prison for so many years. In the garden, the roses swayed in the breeze, free and strong, just as I would be from that day on. In the taxi on the way to the airport, Lauren took my hand. "Are you okay?" I looked out the window, watching the city rush by, taking decades of submission with it. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be." Lauren's apartment in Miami was small but cozy, with a view of the ocean that took my breath away. That first night, sitting on the balcony listening to the waves, I turned on my phone only to turn it off again when I saw there were 17 missed calls from Nathan. "He'll find you eventually," Lauren said as she poured me a glass of wine. "We need a long-term plan." I nodded, feeling strangely calm. I never thought I would have the courage to do this. "I always knew you had it," Lauren smiled. "You just needed a little push." In the following days, my phone kept ringing. Nathan, Rebecca, even my sister Jane, who had probably been recruited to try to locate me. In one of the voicemails, Nathan alternated between desperate pleas and veiled threats. "Mom, please call me. I'm worried about you." And then, "You can't just disappear like this. The house is in my name, remember? Think carefully about what you're doing." I listened to each message with a growing sense of clarity. For decades, I had mistaken control for love, obligation for family loyalty. Not anymore. A week after my escape, I started rebuilding my life. I opened an account at a new bank, rented a small apartment near the beach, and started looking for something to occupy my time. At 68 years old, I had never really worked, but I discovered that my baked goods and embroidery pieces had a market at local craft fairs. Lauren remained in Philadelphia, but became my eyes and ears in my old world. It was she who told me about Nathan's furious visit to her office. "He was out of his mind," she recounted over the phone. "He was demanding to know where you were, threatening to sue, saying you weren't mentally capable of making financial decisions." "And what did you tell him?" I asked. I told him you were perfectly sane and that if he continued with the threats, I would file a restraining order." Lauren laughed. "He turned beet red. I don't think anyone had ever stood up to him before. At the end of the first month, I received a formal letter from Nathan's lawyer. It demanded my immediate return, alleging concern for my mental health and threatening legal action to have me declared incompetent. In the same envelope, there was a handwritten note from Rebecca, surprisingly humble. "Evelyn, please come back. Nathan is out of control. The creditors are pressuring us. We need you." I handed the documents to Lauren, who took care of responding formally, attaching recent medical reports that proved my sanity and a detailed declaration of the loans Nathan had extorted from me over the years. "They don't have a case," Lauren assured me. "But Nathan won't give up easily. He lost his personal bank, and that made him furious." In the second month, I received an unexpected visit. Rebecca appeared at my new apartment, pale and noticeably thinner. "How did you find me?" I asked, surprised to see her at my door. "We hired a private detective," she admitted, looking embarrassed. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, but ended up letting her in. Rebecca looked around my small apartment with curiosity. "It's cozy," she commented, clearly surprised to see me living in such a modest space after the sprawling house I'd left behind. "It's mine," I replied simply. We sat on the small balcony, the ocean visible in the distance. Rebecca held her cup with trembling hands. "Things are bad, Evelyn," she finally said. "Nathan is different, aggressive, losing control." "How are my grandchildren?" I asked, feeling a pang of guilt. "Scared. They don't understand what's happening. Nathan sold the car. We're trying to sell the beach house, all to pay off the debts." She paused. "It wasn't just the $300,000, Evelyn. There's a lot more." I wasn't surprised. Walter always had another hidden debt, too. "So you didn't come here to convince me to go back," I stated. "You came to ask for more money." Rebecca looked down. "It's more complicated than that. The men we owe aren't patient. Nathan told them you have the money." A shiver ran down my spine. "Did he use me as collateral?" Rebecca didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. "You need to get out of that house, Rebecca," I told her, taking her hands. "Take the children and go to your parents' house." "It's not that simple," she murmured. "Nathan controls everything. Our accounts, our documents." Her voice broke. "I don't know how to get out." "The same way I didn't know," I said softly. Her words moved me deeply. It was true. For decades, I didn't know how to get out, how to break the cycle, until I finally found the courage. "I can help you," I offered. "Not with money, but to get out." Rebecca looked at me with a mix of hope and fear. "He'll find us just like he found you." "Then we'll be ready when he does," I replied with a confidence I had never felt before. "But first, we need to get you and the children out of that house." After Rebecca left, with a plan laid out and my new phone number carefully hidden in her boot, I sat on the balcony watching the sunset. The orange horizon seemed to be a symbol of my own transformation, from darkness to light. My phone rang. It was Lauren. "Rebecca found you, didn't she?" she asked bluntly. "How did you know?" "Nathan showed up at my office again, this time with one of his creditors. A scary guy with scars on his face. They made veiled threats, wanting to know where you were." My stomach sank. "What did you tell them?" "I said that if they laid a finger on you, me, or anyone related to this case, I would make sure they spent the rest of their lives behind bars." Lauren paused. "Evelyn, this is getting dangerous. Nathan is desperate." "I know," I replied, watching the last ray of sun disappear over the horizon. "And desperate people do desperate things." The next morning, I was woken by insistent knocking at my door. For one terrifying moment, I thought Nathan had found me. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Evelyn Jackson?" she asked when I opened the door partially. keeping the security chain on. "Yes, that's me. I'm Detective Olivia Thomas, Miami-Dade Police." She showed a badge. "We need to talk about your son, Nathan Jackson." My heart raced. Did something happen to him? The detective's expression remained neutral. "Can I come in?" I let her in and offered her coffee, which she accepted. As I prepared the mugs in the small kitchen, I tried to steady my trembling hands. "Mrs. Jackson," the detective began, sitting on the sofa, "your son is being investigated for financial fraud, document forgery, and possible involvement with loan sharks. We'd like to know if you had any knowledge of these activities." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. A part of me had always known that Nathan wasn't honest in his business dealings, just as his father hadn't been. But hearing the words "police investigation" made it all terribly real. "No," I answered honestly. I knew he had financial problems, but not the extent or nature of them. The detective wrote something in her notebook. "You left home suddenly 2 months ago, correct? Can you tell us why?" I told her everything. The successive loans, the unkept promises, the emotional pressure, the demand for $300,000. The detective listened without interrupting, only making occasional notes. "Did he use your name on any documents? Did he ask you to sign papers without explaining what they were for?" I thought for a moment. "A few years ago, he asked me to sign some documents to facilitate financial transfers in case I needed help. He said it was for my protection in old age." The detective nodded. "We found several suspicious transactions and accounts opened in your name, Mrs. Jackson. Accounts you probably didn't know existed." I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of nausea. Nathan hadn't just manipulated me. He had stolen my identity. "What happens now?" I asked, trying to stay composed. "We will continue the investigation. Your formal statement will be needed soon." She hesitated. "I must warn you that your son will likely be indicted in the coming weeks, and considering the people he got involved with, it would be wise to reinforce your security." After the detective left, I called Lauren, who promised to fly to Miami on the next flight. I always knew Nathan was involved in shady things, but I never imagined it would get to this point. That afternoon, I received a message from Rebecca. "He found out about our plan. I'm locked in the room with the kids. He's breaking everything." My blood ran cold. I immediately called Detective Thomas, who promised to send a patrol car to Nathan's address. The next few hours were a blur of calls, messages, and fragmented updates. By nightfall, all I knew was that Rebecca and my grandchildren were safe at a shelter, and that Nathan had been taken into custody for questioning after resisting police intervention. Lauren arrived around 9:00 p.m., finding me on the balcony, looking out at the dark ocean. She sat beside me in silence for a few minutes. "How do you feel?" she finally asked. "Guilty," I admitted. "If I hadn't left, maybe this wouldn't have happened." Lauren shook her head firmly. "No, Evelyn. If you hadn't left, you would be sinking along with him, probably being used for more fraudulent schemes." She took my hand. "You did the only thing you could have done. You saved yourself. And in doing so, you probably saved Rebecca and your grandchildren, too." The next morning, the headline of the local newspaper took my breath away. "Businessman arrested for fraud and criminal ties." The photo of Nathan being led away in handcuffs by the police seemed to belong to another reality, not my own. My phone rang. It was Detective Thomas. "Mrs. Jackson, your son is requesting your presence at the police station. He insists on only speaking to you." I looked at Lauren, who had already read the news and was watching me with concern. "You don't have to go," she said, "after everything he's done." "Yes, I do," I interrupted, surprising myself. "I need to look him in the eye and end this once and for all." The police station was a cold, impersonal place with fluorescent lights that highlighted every wrinkle on my tired face. Nathan was brought into a visiting room, handcuffed and wearing a gray uniform that made him look smaller, older. When he saw me, his eyes, so much like his father's, filled with tears. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "You came." I sat across from him, keeping my distance. "You wanted to see me. I'm here." Nathan looked like a cornered animal, glancing around as if searching for an escape. "You don't understand the situation I'm in," he began, leaning forward. "These people don't play around. If I don't pay what I owe—" "No!" I interrupted, my voice surprisingly firm. "You don't understand the situation you're in. I'm not here to give you money, Nathan. That time is over." His face changed, the vulnerability giving way to rage. "You abandoned me when I needed you most, your own family. Is that what you're going to tell your grandchildren? That you let their father rot in jail?" I took a deep breath, refusing to be manipulated again. "I'll tell them that their father made bad decisions, just like their grandfather, and that I finally made a good one." Nathan slammed his handcuffed hands on the table. "The house is in my name. You have nothing." "I have myself," I replied, standing up. "Something I almost completely lost because of men like you and your father." I walked to the door, then stopped and turned. "Rebecca and the children are safe. They'll have a chance to start over away from you." I paused. "And so will I." As I walked out of the police station, I felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The Miami sun was shining brightly, almost blinding after the artificial light of the station. Lauren was waiting for me in the car. "How did it go?" she asked, concerned. I took one last look at the gray building where I had left my son and decades of submission. "Liberating," I replied, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled a genuine smile. 6 months had passed since my escape and Nathan's arrest. Winter had come to Miami, bringing strong winds and a rough sea. My small apartment now truly felt like a home, with my plants on the balcony and the colorful embroidery pieces I sold at the local fair adorning the walls. Rebecca and my grandchildren, 8-year-old Tyler and 6-year-old Sophia, had moved to a town in Idaho near her family. We spoke weekly on video calls, a technology I learned to master with Lauren's help. The children were adapting well to their new life, though they still asked about their father occasionally. "Grandma, when can we visit you?" Tyler asked during our last conversation. "During summer vacation. I promise we'll build sandcastles and look for shells on the beach." Rebecca's image appeared on the screen, smiling shyly. She looked healthier now, with fuller cheeks and a calmer gaze. "Are you really inviting us, Evelyn?" "Of course, my apartment is small, but we'll all fit. It'll be nice to have the sound of children's laughter around here." After the call, I sat on the balcony watching the angry waves crash on the beach. Nathan's trial was scheduled for the next month. The accusations were serious: fraud, forgery, use of fake documents, association with a criminal organization. Lauren estimated a sentence of at least 10 years. I had agreed to testify not for revenge, but for justice. For myself, for Rebecca, and for everyone else Nathan had deceived over the years. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Evelyn Jackson. This is David Rodriguez, your son's lawyer." I felt a tightness in my chest. In the last few months, Nathan had changed lawyers several times, each one promising legal miracles that never materialized. "What can I do for you, Mr. Rodriguez?" "Nathan would like to propose a deal. He has information on bigger operations that might interest the district attorney in exchange for a reduced sentence, but he needs your help." I took a deep breath, already imagining where this was going. "What kind of help?" "Financial, of course, to cover the fees of a specialized legal team. $200,000. I almost laughed. The audacity was incredible. "Mr. Rodriguez, I no longer have that amount, and even if I did, I wouldn't use it that way." "Mrs. Jackson, His tone hardened. Your son is facing more than 10 years in prison. As a mother, I interrupted. I did what I could for decades. Now Nathan needs to face the consequences of his own actions. There was a prolonged silence on the other end of the line. He said you would answer like that. He asked me to tell you that he still has copies of documents you signed, documents that could implicate you in some of his schemes. My stomach nodded, but I kept my voice firm. Tell my son that blackmail is another crime to add to his list, and that I'm willing to face any accusation if it means finally breaking this cycle. I hung up the phone with trembling hands. I immediately called Lauren and told her about the conversation. He's bluffing, she assured me. Any documents you might have signed, we already clarified with the police that it was under manipulation. Besides, the investigation has already established a pattern of his behavior. Still, that night was difficult. I stayed awake, mentally reviewing every paper I had signed over the years at Nathan's or Walter's request. How many contracts, how many powers of attorney, how many documents I barely read, trusting that my husband or my son had my best interests at heart. The answer was too many, but I wouldn't allow fear to control me anymore. I had broken free, and I would stay free, no matter what came next. The next morning I woke to the sound of waves crashing against the shore. For a moment I forgot everything. Nathan, the trial, the threats. I was just an old woman enjoying the ocean view from her Miami apartment. Then reality rushed back like the tide. I made myself a cup of coffee and took it to the balcony. The morning sun painted the water with gold, and a few early joggers dotted the beach. This was my life now. Simple, modest, but mine. My phone buzzed with a message from Lauren. Trial date confirmed, February 15th. I've booked your flights to Philadelphia. The date was exactly 3 weeks away. I felt a mix of dread and determination. This would be my chance to finally break the cycle of manipulation and abuse that had defined my life for too long. I spent the morning at the local craft fair, selling my embroidery pieces. The colorful designs had become quite popular among tourists, and I was making enough to supplement my drastically reduced retirement fund. The work gave me purpose, and the conversations with customers filled some of the loneliness that occasionally crept in. These are beautiful, said an elderly woman examining a pillowcase with delicate blue flowers. Did you learn this from your mother? Yes, I smiled. She taught me when I was 7, said a lady should always have something to do with her hands. My mother said the same thing, she laughed. I'm Martha, by the way. Evelyn. We chatted while she picked out several pieces, and before she left, she invited me to a seniors book club that met at the local library every Thursday. You should come, she insisted. We're reading Jane Austen this month. I promised to think about it. Making new friends hadn't been a priority in my 6 months in Miami. Survival had been my focus. But perhaps it was time to build more than just financial independence. That evening, I had my weekly video call with Rebecca and the children. Tyler showed me a science project he was working on, a volcano made of paper mache that would erupt with baking soda and vinegar. Sophia, always the artist, had drawn a picture of a beach house with 4 stick figures labeled Grandma, Mom, Tyler, and Sophia. This is us at your house, she explained, her face close to the camera, revealing a missing front tooth I hadn't noticed before. It's beautiful, sweetheart, I said, feeling my throat tighten. I'll put it on my refrigerator when you send it to me. Rebecca appeared in the frame after putting the children to bed. She looked tired, but more settled than in previous calls. How are things? I asked. Better, she replied. I found a part-time job at the elementary school, just administrative work, but it's something, and my parents have been incredible with the kids. And Nathan, has he tried to contact you? She nodded. His lawyer calls weekly, trying to convince me not to testify. He's offered to forgive my debts if I refuse to cooperate with the prosecution. What debts? I asked, confused. Rebecca laughed bitterly. Exactly. Nathan always treated our finances as if I owed him for every dollar I spent, even though I worked and contributed to our household until the children were born. She paused. I had no idea how bad things really were until the police started going through our finances. He had loans in my name that I never knew about, credit cards I never saw. The revelation sent a chill through me. It was like hearing about Walter all over again. Rebecca, I said carefully, I want you to know that what happened isn't your fault. Men like Nathan, like Walter, they're experts at making you believe you're dependent on them, that you can't survive without them. I know that now, she said quietly, but I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected the children better. We both should have, I admitted, but we're doing it now. That's what matters. After the call ended, I sat in silence, thinking about the generational pattern I had unwittingly helped perpetuate. Walter controlled me, and I had raised a son who controlled his wife. The cycle had to end with Nathan. The next morning, I received an unexpected visitor. Detective Thomas stood at my door, her expression serious. Mrs. Jackson, may I come in? There's been a development in your son's case. I invited her in, my heart racing. Is Nathan all right? He's physically fine, she assured me, declining my offer of coffee. But there's been a concerning incident. Your son attempted to bribe a guard to smuggle a cell phone into his cell. That sounds like Nathan, I said, unsurprised. The guard was part of an internal operation and recorded everything. What concerns us is the call Nathan intended to make as soon as he had the phone. She handed me a transcript. I read it, feeling a coldness that seemed to come from inside my bones. I need to talk to Marcus. Tell him I'll have his money soon. My mom has cash hidden somewhere. Lauren Howard knows where she is. If I can't pay, you know where to find her. Miami, probably. Get the address from Howard. My own son was willing to put my life at risk to save his own skin. Mrs. Jackson, the detective spoke gently. Considering this new evidence, we are offering you temporary police protection, and we strongly suggest you consider relocating once again. I returned home escorted by an officer. Lauren was already there, having been informed by the detective. She hugged me as soon as I walked in. I'm already looking for a new place for you, she said. A gated community with security. I looked around my small apartment at the plants I had so lovingly cared for, the colorful curtains I had sewn, the view of the ocean that brought me peace every morning. No, I said, surprising myself. I'm not going to run again. I'm not going to let Nathan continue to control my life, even from behind bars. Lauren looked at me with a mix of concern and admiration. Evelyn, these men are dangerous. I know, and I'm going to take all necessary precautions, but this is my home now, the first one I truly chose for myself. I'm not going to give it up. In the following days, we installed a complete security system, cameras, alarms, reinforced locks. The police increased patrols in the neighborhood, and 2 plainclothes officers took turns in a car parked in front of the building. Rebecca called me in a panic after being informed of the situation. Evelyn, come here. Stay with us, please. I'm safe, honey, I reassured her. And I have a life here now. My craft fairs, my friends, my senior swimming classes. I laughed slightly. At 68 years old, I finally found out who I am when I'm not taking care of ungrateful men. 2 weeks later, I received the official subpoena to testify at Nathan's trial. Lauren, who had stayed in Miami with me, reviewed the document. Are you ready for this? Facing him in court won't be easy. I looked out the window toward the ocean that had become my confidant. I'm ready. The courthouse in Philadelphia was an imposing building downtown. I was back in the city for the first time since my escape. feeling a strange disconnect from the streets that had been my home for decades. Lauren was driving while I watched the urban landscape pass by the window. "Nervous?" she asked when we parked. "Strangely, no," I replied. "I feel like I'm closing a chapter." In the courtroom, I sat next to Lauren in the front row. The prosecutor, a middle-aged woman with shrewd eyes named Sarah Mitchell, came to greet us before the session began. "Mrs. Jackson, your testimony will be crucial today. Nathan is trying to present himself as a victim of circumstances, manipulated by more powerful associates." "He was always good at presenting himself as a victim," I commented. The side door opened and Nathan entered, escorted by 2 guards. He was thinner, his face marked by deep dark circles under his eyes. Our gazes met for a moment, his pleading, mine firm. The judge entered and everyone stood up. The trial began with procedural formalities followed by the testimony of forensic accountants who detailed the complexity of Nathan's financial schemes. When my name was finally called, I walked to the witness stand with slow but determined steps. After the oath, the prosecutor began. "Mrs. Jackson, can you tell us about your relationship with the defendant, your son?" I looked directly at Nathan as I spoke. "I raised him alone after my husband's death 10 years ago. Before that, we lived as a seemingly normal family. Only seemingly." "What do you mean?" Ms. Mitchell asked. "My husband, Walter, Nathan's father, was also manipulative and financially controlling. Nathan learned from the best." The prosecutor nodded. "Can you detail how your son manipulated you financially?" I told them everything. The successive loans, the unkept promises, the emotional pressure, the veiled blackmail. In the last episode, he demanded $300,000, practically all my savings, to supposedly pay off his wife's debt. When I realized I would never see that money again, just like I hadn't seen the previous amounts, I decided to leave. "What made you make that decision after so many years of giving in to his demands?" I thought for a moment. Was it the contempt in his voice? The way he took my compliance for granted? I answered honestly. When he said, "Don't disappoint me, Mom," I realized he didn't see me as a person, just as a resource to be exploited. In that moment, something inside me broke, and it mended in a different way. Nathan's lawyer stood for cross-examination. He was a middle-aged man in an expensive suit with a calculating expression. "Mrs. Jackson, do you consider yourself a good mother?" The question took me by surprise. I saw the prosecutor begin to object, but I raised my hand slightly. For decades, I believed that being a good mother meant giving my son everything: money, time, my self-esteem. Now I understand that being a good mother also means teaching responsibility and consequences. "You abandoned your son when he needed you most," the lawyer pressed. "No, sir. I stopped enabling destructive behavior. There's a big difference." "And what about the threats your son supposedly made against you? Don't you find it convenient that these allegations are only coming up now, just as he's about to propose a deal with the district attorney?" I remained calm despite the insinuation. "The recordings speak for themselves. And no, I don't find it convenient that my own son offered my address to criminals as collateral for his debts. I find it tragic." When I was finally dismissed, I returned to my seat, feeling my legs tremble. Lauren squeezed my hand in silence. The trial continued with other testimonies, Nathan's employees, harmed clients, even Rebecca, who described years of lies and manipulation. Throughout it all, I watched Nathan become more and more agitated, whispering furiously with his lawyer. At the end of the day, when the judge announced a recess until the next morning, Nathan looked at me one last time before being led away. There was no longer a plea in his eyes, just a cold hatred that made me shudder. Back at the hotel that night, I couldn't sleep. Nathan's expression haunted me. It was the same expression Walter used to have when he didn't get what he wanted, a mix of rage and calculation, as if he were planning his next move. In the morning, we returned to the courthouse to hear the closing arguments. The prosecutor presented a solid case, detailing years of fraud and manipulation. Nathan's lawyer tried to paint him as a struggling businessman who had made mistakes but not intentional crimes. When the judge retired to deliberate, Lauren and I went to a nearby cafe for coffee. I was distractedly stirring my coffee when I noticed a man sitting a few tables away watching us. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away. "Lauren," I whispered, "is that man watching us?" She glanced discreetly. "He must be a reporter. The case has gotten some local media attention." But something about the man's posture, the way he avoided eye contact while clearly monitoring us, alarmed me. "Let's go back to the courthouse," I suggested. As we left, I noticed the man also getting up. On the way back, he kept his distance but continued to follow us. At the courthouse, I mentioned the incident to one of the police officers who promised to keep an eye out. The session resumed with the judge returning to announce his decision. In the case of the State versus Nathan Walter Jackson, this court finds the defendant guilty on all charges. A wave of relief washed over me, immediately followed by a deep sadness. My son, the boy I once cradled in my arms, was now officially a convicted criminal. The judge continued, detailing the sentence. 12 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 8 years, in addition to fines and restitution to the victims. Nathan remained impassive during the sentencing. When the guards approached to lead him away, he turned in my direction. "This isn't over," he said, just loud enough for me to hear. "You're going to regret this." As we left the courthouse, I again noticed the same man watching from a distance. This time I pointed him out directly to the officer accompanying us. The man noticed and quickly disappeared into the crowd. "We need to go back to Miami today," I told Lauren as we walked to the car. "I don't feel safe here." In the week following the trial, I tried to get back to my routine in Miami. Police protection had been reduced to periodic patrols, as Nathan's threats seemed less viable now that he was convicted and under constant surveillance. One afternoon, as I was returning from the craft fair where I sold my embroidered pieces, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked near my building. Something about the vehicle put me on high alert. Maybe it was the fact that the windows were too dark, or that it was strategically positioned to have a view of the building's entrance. Instead of going into the building, I walked right past it and called Detective Thomas. "It might be nothing," she admitted when I described the car. "But it doesn't hurt to check. Stay in a public place while we send someone." I went into a nearby cafe and waited, watching through the window. 20 minutes later, a patrol car approached the suspicious vehicle. 2 men quickly got out of the car and tried to walk away, but were intercepted by the police. My phone rang. It was the detective. "Mrs. Jackson, we caught 2 individuals with criminal records. They had unregistered weapons and your address written down on a piece of paper." A shiver ran down my spine. Nathan's associates, probably. "We're interrogating them now. Do you have a safe place you can stay for a few days?" I called Lauren immediately. Her response was quick and decisive. "I'll come get you in an hour. We'll go to my beach house in Naples. Nobody knows about it." I returned to my apartment, escorted by police, to pack some essential belongings. As I hurriedly packed a suitcase, I looked around at the home I had so lovingly built. Once again, I needed to run. Or maybe not. A thought began to form in my mind. An idea that would have seemed absurd to the old Evelyn, but that now made perfect sense. When Lauren arrived, I explained my plan to her. "It's risky," she warned. "Living in fear is riskier," I replied. "And I'm tired of hiding." The next day, instead of hiding out in Naples, I went back to my apartment with a clear objective. With the help of Detective Thomas and her team, we set a trap. The two arrested men had been persuaded to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. They revealed that Nathan, using another inmate's phone privileges, had hired a third person to give me a scare, a euphemism for something much more sinister. "He doesn't seem to care if you get really hurt," the detective explained. "He just wants you to know that he still has power, even from inside prison." The plan was simple. I would maintain my normal routine, pretending not to know anything, while plainclothes officers monitored my every move. When Nathan's hired thug showed up, he would be arrested in the act. For 3 days, I lived in a state of constant alert. Every noise made me jump. Every stranger on the street seemed like a threat. On the morning of the 4th day, while I was watering the plants on my balcony, I noticed a man leaning against a lamppost on the other side of the street, watching me directly. Our eyes met briefly before I went inside the apartment and signaled to the plainclothes officer disguised as a maintenance worker who was fixing my kitchen sink. "That's him," I whispered. "I'm sure of it." The man continued to watch the building for about half an hour. Then slowly he began to cross the street toward the entrance. The doorman, another disguised officer, let him in without question. I sat on the living room sofa facing the door and waited. My heart was beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. The police had hidden in the bathroom with the door ajar, ready to intervene. The doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and went to answer. "Mrs. Evelyn Jackson?" the man asked, a common-looking individual who could easily go unnoticed in a crowd. "Yes. I have a message from your son." Before he could make any move, 3 officers emerged from different points in the apartment, quickly subduing him. The man didn't resist, seeming almost relieved to have been caught. Later that day, Detective Thomas visited me to inform me that the man had confessed everything. Nathan had promised to pay him $5,000 to scare the ungrateful mother who had abandoned him. "And what exactly did scare mean?" I asked. The detective hesitated. "It involved breaking some objects in your apartment, making verbal threats, and," she paused, "leaving visible marks on you. Nothing fatal, but enough to make you never feel safe again." I sat down, feeling my legs buckle. "Is that enough for new charges against Nathan?" "Yes. Attempted assault, hiring a third party to commit a crime, threats. That will probably eliminate any possibility of parole for the next several years." A week later, I visited Nathan in prison. He seemed surprised to see me, as if he didn't expect me to have the courage to face him again. "I came to say goodbye, Nathan," I said when we sat face to face, separated by glass. "And to let you know that the person you hired to threaten me has confessed everything. You're going to face new charges and will probably be here a lot longer than you imagined." He laughed bitterly. "What life? You're 68 years old, Mom. You're all alone." "I'm free," I corrected him. "And I've discovered that it's never too late to start over. You know, I always defined myself as Walter's wife or Nathan's mother. Now I'm discovering who Evelyn is." He looked at me with a mix of contempt and confusion. "And who is Evelyn?" I smiled genuinely. "A woman who finally learned to value herself. A woman who is no longer afraid." Nathan slammed his hands on the glass, frustrated. "You think this is over, but it's not." "When that day comes, if it comes, I'll be ready." I stood up. "Goodbye, Nathan." As I walked out of the prison, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in decades. The sky was a particularly brilliant blue that day. The air seemed sweeter. Lauren was waiting for me in the car. "How did it go?" she asked. "Liberating," I replied. "Truly liberating." One Saturday morning, about a month after the prison visit, I received a surprising call from Rebecca. "Evelyn, the kids and I are at the Miami airport. We wanted to surprise you." Her voice was hesitant. "Is that okay?" "Of course it's okay," I exclaimed, already gathering my purse and keys. "I'll be right there to pick you up." On the way to the airport, my mind raced with excitement and worry. My small, one-bedroom apartment wasn't prepared for guests, especially children. Where would they sleep? What would they eat? I hadn't grocery shopped for more than 1 in months, but these practical concerns melted away when I saw Tyler and Sophia running toward me at the arrivals gate, their faces lit up with excitement. "Grandma!" Sophia launched herself into my arms, nearly knocking me over. Tyler, trying to appear more grown up, hung back for a moment before giving in and hugging me tightly. Rebecca stood behind them, looking nervous. "I hope this is all right. They've been asking about you nonstop." "It's more than all right," I assured her. "It's exactly what I needed." That weekend was a whirlwind of activity. Beach visits, ice cream outings, a trip to the small aquarium nearby. We crammed into my apartment, the children sleeping on an air mattress in the living room, Rebecca taking my bed while I used the fold-out couch. It was chaotic, crowded, and absolutely wonderful. On Sunday evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the sunset, Rebecca broached the subject we had been avoiding. "Nathan's lawyer called again. He's facing those new charges, and he's desperate. He's offering to sign over the house to you if you'll speak on his behalf." I considered this for a moment. The house had been my home for 40 years, filled with memories both painful and precious, but it was also a symbol of my captivity. "The house is legally his," I said. "Walter made sure of that. But I don't want it anymore. That chapter of my life is closed." Rebecca nodded, understanding. "I told the lawyer no. I thought that's what you'd say." She hesitated. "There's something else. My parents are selling their vacation property in Naples. It's small, but it has 2 bedrooms, and it's in a gated community, very safe. They're offering it to me at a reduced price." "That's wonderful, Rebecca." "The thing is," she continued, "they're willing to make it a package deal. The main house for me and the kids, and the guest cottage for you, if you're interested." The offer took me by surprise. "You want me to live near you?" "The kids miss you. And honestly, I could use the help. I'm starting a full-time job next month, and after-school care is expensive." She looked out at the ocean. "Plus, I've never really had a mother figure who wasn't controlling. It's nice." I felt tears welling up. For decades, I had been defined by what I gave. Money, time, emotional support, never by who I was or what I might need. "I'd like that very much," I said, taking her hand. "As long as I can keep my independence and my embroidery business." Rebecca laughed. "Deal. And maybe you can teach Sophia. She's been trying to copy your designs." That night, after Rebecca and the children had gone to sleep, I sat on the balcony alone, watching the moonlight on the water. I thought about the strange turns life takes, how running away from Nathan had ultimately led me back to a different kind of family, one based on mutual respect rather than control. I thought about Nathan, sitting in his prison cell, still believing he could manipulate me, still believing that money and property were what mattered most. He had never understood the true value of family, of freedom, of self-worth. As I looked at the stars above Miami, I realized something important. I was no longer defined by my trauma. I was Evelyn Jackson, grandmother, artisan, survivor, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. 1 year had passed since my escape. Autumn had come to Naples, Florida, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks each evening. The guest cottage on Rebecca's property had become my sanctuary, small but perfectly suited to my needs, with a dedicated space for my embroidery work and a tiny garden where I grew herbs and flowers. My business had flourished beyond anything I could have imagined. What started as simple embroidered pieces had evolved into a small enterprise called Evelyn's Threads, selling custom-made items online and at local artisan markets. I had even hired 2 part-time assistants, women in their 60s who, like me, had found themselves starting over later in life. Tyler, now 9, and Sophia, 7, spent most afternoons with me after school, while Rebecca worked as an administrative coordinator at the local hospital. Our routine was comfortably established. Homework at the kitchen table, followed by cookies and stories. Sometimes a walk to the small pond where ducks gathered, waiting for breadcrumbs. "Grandma, can I try using the gold thread today?" Sophia asked one afternoon, peering at my embroidery basket with longing. She had shown a remarkable aptitude for needlework, her small fingers surprisingly deft with delicate stitches. "Of course, sweetheart. But remember, I know. Small stitches, even tension," she recited, already reaching for the special thread. Tyler glanced up from his math homework. "I don't get why you guys like poking fabric with needles for hours." "It's not just poking fabric," Sophia retorted. "It's making something beautiful." "It's also patience," I added, watching Sophia carefully thread her needle. "Learning that beautiful things take time." That evening, after the children had gone back to the main house, Rebecca came over for our weekly cup of tea, a ritual we had established early in our new living arrangement. "The school called today," she said, stirring honey into her chamomile. "Tyler's teacher thinks he might benefit from some additional support in math." "I've noticed he struggles with it," I agreed. "He gets frustrated easily." Rebecca sighed. "He's so much like his father sometimes. The same stubborn pride, the same refusal to ask for help." She caught herself. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't compare them." "It's natural to see echoes," I said gently. "The important thing is that we're breaking the pattern. Tyler is learning it's okay to need help, that vulnerability isn't weakness." "Speaking of Nathan," Rebecca said hesitantly, "his lawyer called again. He's being transferred to a medium security facility next month. Apparently, he's been a model prisoner since the new charges. Therapy, anger management, the works." I nodded, absorbing this information without the flood of anxiety it might once have triggered. "Do you think it's genuine?" Rebecca shrugged. "The psychologist's report says he's making progress, but who knows? I've decided to let him write to the children, under my supervision. Their therapist thinks some contact might be healthier than complete absence." "That seems reasonable," I agreed. Children need to form their own opinions about their parents, even flawed ones. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the sunset through the cottage windows. These quiet moments with Rebecca had become precious to me, a relationship rebuilt from the ruins of mutual manipulation by the same man. "Oh, before I forget," Rebecca said, reaching into her purse. "This came for you today." She handed me an official-looking envelope. Inside was a letter from the court, confirming that Nathan's latest appeal had been denied. He would serve his full sentence, 12 years, with the additional charges for the attempted intimidation. "Are you relieved?" Rebecca asked, watching my expression. "Yes," I admitted, "but also sad. 12 years is a long time. Long enough for him to change, maybe?" I thought about Walter, about patterns so deeply ingrained they became identity. "I hope so, but I'm not counting on it." My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. It was Lauren, who now visited regularly from Philadelphia, having become as much a part of our unconventional family as anyone. "Evelyn, turn on your TV, Channel 7 now." I frowned, reaching for the remote. "What's happening?" "Just watch." The local news was running a story about financial fraud targeting seniors. The screen showed a familiar face being led away in handcuffs. Marcus Donovan, the loan shark Nathan had been involved with, the man who had sent people to threaten me. A major breakthrough in the case came when evidence provided by inmate Nathan Jackson led authorities to Donovan's operation, the reporter explained. Jackson, currently serving time for related financial crimes, has been cooperating with federal investigators. I muted the TV and looked at Rebecca, who appeared equally stunned. Nathan gave them Donovan? She asked, disbelief in her voice. Apparently, I replied, equally confused. Nathan had been fiercely loyal to his criminal associates, even at his own expense. This cooperation represented a significant shift. Why would he do that? Rebecca wondered. It's not like it will reduce his sentence significantly. I shook my head, uncertain. I don't know. That night, sleep eluded me. I sat on the small porch of my cottage, watching stars appear in the velvet sky, thinking about Nathan. Was this cooperation a genuine change of heart, or just another manipulation? Could people truly transform after a lifetime of destructive patterns? I thought of myself at 68, finding courage I never knew I had. If I could change after decades of submission, perhaps Nathan could too. The thought was both hopeful and terrifying. 2 weeks after the news story about Donovan's arrest, I received a letter with the correctional facility's stamp. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. "Mom," it began. No dear, no warmth, just a statement of fact. I don't know if you'll read this or just throw it away. I wouldn't blame you if you did. The therapist here says I should write anyway, that it's part of taking responsibility for my actions regardless of the outcome. I gave them Donovan, not for a reduced sentence. They only shaved off 6 months. But because I realized something during group therapy. We were talking about ripple effects, how our actions spread out and hurt people beyond our immediate targets. I thought about how Donovan's men came after you, how scared you must have been. It made me sick, physically sick. That's new for me, caring about how someone else feels. Dad never taught me that. He taught me to see people as resources, as stepping stones. I'm not making excuses. I made my choices. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for a response. I just wanted you to know that the man who threatened you won't be able to do that to anyone else. Nathan. I read the letter 3 times, searching for the manipulation, the hidden agenda. But it seemed different from Nathan's usual tactics. No grand declarations of change, no promises of redemption, just a simple acknowledgement of wrong. I took the letter to my next therapy session, another healthy habit I had acquired in my new life. Dr. Sarah Marshall had been helping me work through decades of conditioned responses, teaching me to recognize manipulation and set boundaries. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I showed her the letter. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to believe he's really changing. Another part reminds me how many times I've been fooled before. "What if both parts are right?" Dr. Marshall suggested. "What if he is trying to change, but it's still not safe for you to reconnect?" Those words stayed with me in the following days. Finally, I wrote a brief response. "Nathan, I received your letter. I can't say that I trust your words. Trust once broken is difficult to regain, but I acknowledge your effort to seek help and reflect on your actions. My life now is focused on helping women who went through what I did. I've found purpose and peace in that work. I sincerely hope you find your way too. If it is a true path of change, maybe we can talk again one day. Not as the mother and son we were, but as 2 people trying to do better. Evelyn." I sent the letter without any great expectations, and I didn't receive a response for months. That was okay. My life had taken its own course, independent of Nathan and the shadows of the past. Spring came to Naples, transforming the landscape with vibrant colors and fresh growth. My small business had expanded further. I now taught embroidery classes at the community center twice a week, mostly to older women looking for creative outlets and social connections. It was after one of these classes that I met Christine Ward. "Your work is beautiful," she said. examining a display of my embroidered wall hangings. So precise, yet emotional. "Thank you," I replied, noticing something vaguely familiar about her face. The shape of her eyes, the set of her jaw. "Are you new to the area?" "Just visiting," she said. "My daughter lives nearby." She hesitated. "Actually, I came here hoping to find you, Evelyn." A chill ran through me. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know your ex-husband. I was married to Walter Jackson before you." I stared at her, speechless. Walter had only vaguely mentioned a previous marriage, saying his ex-wife was unstable and obsessed with money, ironies I could now appreciate. "Would you like to have coffee?" I finally offered. Sitting in a small cafe with 2 cups of tea between us, Christine explained why she had sought me out. "I saw the news about Nathan, about how he financially manipulated you for years. Then I read a piece about your embroidery business in the local paper, about how you'd rebuilt your life." She took a deep breath. "When I read about you, I realized I needed to find you, to close a chapter maybe." "How did you find me?" I asked, still wary. "It wasn't hard. Your story has spread among support groups for women who suffered financial abuse. You've become a kind of symbol of resistance." I couldn't hide my surprise. "Me? A symbol?" Christine smiled. "A woman of almost 70 who left everything behind and started over, facing her own son in court? Yes, Evelyn, you've inspired a lot of us." We talked for hours. Christine told me how Walter had isolated her from her family, controlled every penny, and made her feel incompetent at managing money. How when she finally divorced him, he left her with practically nothing, only to marry me months later. It was a story that eerily echoed my own life. "When he died," she continued, "I felt a strange mix of relief and rage. Relief because he could no longer manipulate anyone. Rage because there was never any justice. He never had to face what he did." "I understand perfectly," I said. "For a long time, I only blamed Nathan for his actions, but now I see that Walter planted those seeds. Our son just followed the example he saw at home." "The cycle continues," Christine murmured, "unless someone breaks it." At the end of our conversation, we exchanged contact information and promised to keep in touch. After she left, I stayed at the cafe, reflecting on our conversation. Walter and Nathan, father and son, both now out of my life, one by death, the other by prison, but both leaving scars I was still learning to heal. That night I wrote in my journal, a habit I had recently developed. The words flowed easily. Today, at 69 years old, I realized that I spent most of my life trying to be what others wanted me to be. A devoted wife, a selfless mother, a personal bank, always available, always giving in, always afraid of displeasing. Now, finally, I'm learning to just be Evelyn, and discovering that Evelyn is stronger, braver, and more capable than I ever imagined. The money Nathan extorted from me over the years, I can't get back. The years I spent in a suffocating marriage to Walter, I can't have them back. But the time I have left, that's all mine. To live as I choose, without fear, without manipulation, without regrets. The next day, I received an email from Christine. She had talked to other women who had gone through similar situations and suggested forming a support group. I accepted immediately. Our first meeting was at a cafe near the beach. There were 5 of us, all with stories of financial and emotional control by husbands, sons, or brothers. We shared our experiences, our sorrows, our small and large victories. At the end of the meeting, Lauren, who had flown in from Philadelphia to support me, suggested, "You should formalize this. Create a nonprofit organization or something. There are so many women out there who need to hear these stories. who need to know that it's never too late to start over. The idea quickly took shape. Within a few months, New Beginnings was officially registered as a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting women victims of financial and emotional abuse. Using my embroidery skills, I created our symbol, a colorful phoenix rising from ashes. Our first public conference attracted more than 50 women. I was nervous as I walked onto the small makeshift stage, but when I started to speak, my voice grew stronger. My name is Evelyn Jackson. I'm 69 years old. For almost 7 decades, I allowed others to control my life and my money. First my husband, then my son, until one day when my son demanded $300,000, almost everything I had. Something inside me broke and mended itself. I looked at the attentive faces in the audience. It is never too late to say no. It is never too late to start over. And it is never ever too late to find out who you really are when you're not living for someone else's approval. The applause was deafening. The organization grew rapidly. We established a hotline, created educational materials, and developed a network of volunteer lawyers, including Lauren, who offered pro bono services to women trapped in financially abusive relationships. Christine became our outreach coordinator, turning her bitter experience into a force for good. 2 years after my escape, I received another letter from Nathan, written in handwriting that seemed more contained, less impulsive than I remembered. Mom, it's strange to write that word now. I think I've lost the right to use it. I'm writing not to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but to say that I'm continuing therapy here in prison. The therapist made me see patterns I couldn't see before. How I repeated with you exactly what Dad did. How I learned to see people as resources, not as people. I'm not apologizing. I'm just acknowledging the truth. And the truth is that you were right to let me face the consequences of my actions. I know you'll probably throw this letter away, and I don't blame you. I just wanted you to know that despite everything, I'm proud of who you've become. I saw your picture in the newspaper speaking to those women. You looked different, stronger. Nathan, I read the letter several times, feeling contradictory emotions. Caution, because I knew Nathan's capacity for manipulation well, sadness for what could have been, and surprisingly, a touch of hope. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I took the letter to my next therapy session with Dr. Marshall. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I read her the letter. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me still wants to believe he's really changing. Another part reminds me how many times I was fooled before. "Maybe this isn't about whether he's changed or not," Dr. Marshall suggested. "Maybe it's about what you need to feel safe and whole." I thought about that for a long time. What did I need? Not Nathan's redemption, not his remorse. Those were his journey. What I needed was to live my life on my terms, free from fear and manipulation. Finally, I wrote a response. "Nathan, thank you for your letter. I'm glad to hear you're continuing therapy and gaining insights into your patterns. I've been thinking about what it means to forgive. I don't think forgiveness is about erasing what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. I think it's about refusing to let that hurt control my future. In that sense, I have forgiven you, not for your benefit, but for mine. I've let go of the anger that once threatened to consume me. I've built a life I love, surrounded by people who respect my boundaries. I can't predict whether we'll ever have a meaningful relationship again. That would require profound change on your part and continued healing on mine. But I can say that I hope you find peace and purpose, just as I have. Evelyn, spring passed into summer, and summer into fall. New Beginnings continued to grow, now with chapters in 3 states. Rebecca was promoted at the hospital, and the children thrived in school. Tyler, initially resistant to therapy, had finally begun to open up about his feelings regarding his father. Sophia had started selling her own small embroidery pieces at local craft fairs, proudly following in my footsteps. In November, I received a phone call from the prison's rehabilitation coordinator. "Mrs. Jackson, this is Daniel Carter from Pine Ridge Correctional Facility. I'm calling regarding your son, Nathan Jackson." My heart raced. "Is he all right?" "Yes, ma'am. Actually, he's been selected for our community service program. Inmates with good behavior can work on projects outside the facility. Nathan specifically requested the Urban Garden Restoration Project at Riverside Park." I frowned, confused. "Why are you calling me about this?" There was a slight hesitation. "The park is about 15 blocks from your former address in Miami. Given the history between you and Nathan, we needed to confirm that you are comfortable with him working in that area." "I don't live in Miami anymore," I explained. "We're aware of that," Mr. Carter replied. "But Nathan asked us to check with you anyway. He wanted to ensure you wouldn't feel threatened in any way if you happened to visit the area." I was silent for a moment, processing this information. The old Nathan would never have considered my feelings or comfort. He would have assumed his rights superseded mine. "It's fine," I finally said. "I have no objection." After hanging up, I sat on my cottage porch, watching butterflies flit among the flowering shrubs I had planted. The Nathan I had known for most of my adult life was self-centered, manipulative, and entitled. The man who asked for my comfort to be considered before making a decision that affected me seemed like someone else entirely. Could people truly change? Or was this just another sophisticated manipulation? I wasn't naive enough to believe that a few years in prison had completely transformed Nathan. Real change was slow, difficult, often inconsistent. But I was open to the possibility that he was trying, that somewhere in the wreckage of our relationship, something genuine might be salvaged. Not the unbalanced, manipulative bond we once had, but something new, something healthier. In December, I received a small package from the prison. Inside was a book on financial literacy for women, with a brief note. "I thought this might be useful for your organization. The librarian here recommended it." Nathan. I added the book to New Beginnings' growing resource library without responding. It was a small gesture, but it suggested Nathan was paying attention to my work, to what mattered to me now. As Christmas approached, Rebecca asked if I thought the children should be allowed to send cards to their father. "I think it would be good for them," I said. "They need to form their own relationship with him, separate from our experiences." "What about you?" she asked. "Will you send anything?" I considered the question. "Not a card, but maybe a photo of the community center where we're holding workshops. Let him see the positive impact of the organization." Rebecca smiled. "That's very you, Evelyn. Showing instead of telling." On Christmas Eve, we gathered in Rebecca's home. Lauren, Christine, the children, and several friends we had made in Naples. The house glowed with warm light. Laughter echoed through the rooms, and for a moment, I was overwhelmed by the journey that had brought me here. From a controlled, diminished existence to this rich tapestry of meaningful connections and purposeful work. From fear to freedom. From silence to voice. After everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone by the Christmas tree, watching the lights twinkle. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Jackson, this is Officer Wilson from Pine Ridge. Nathan asked me to let you know he received the photo of the community center. His exact words were, 'Tell my mother she was always stronger than she knew. Merry Christmas.'" I set the phone down, unexpected tears blurring the Christmas lights into stars. Perhaps this was the greatest gift of my journey. Not just finding my own strength, but having it recognized by the very person who once tried to diminish it. 3 years after my escape, on my 70th birthday, Rebecca organized a surprise party at the community center. Women from New Beginnings, friends from my embroidery classes, Lauren, Christine, and dozens of others gathered to celebrate not just my birthday, but the journey we had all taken together. As I looked around at the faces of these women, many of whom had their own stories of escape and renewal, I felt a profound sense of purpose. My pain had become a bridge to help others, my experience a map for those still finding their way. During the party, Lauren pulled me aside. "There's something I need to tell you. Nathan's parole hearing is scheduled for next month." I nodded, surprised by my own calm. "Do you think he'll get it?" "Given his cooperation with the authorities and his exemplary behavior, it's possible. They'll likely release him to a halfway house first, with strict supervision." "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I'll need to think about what this means for me, for Rebecca and the children." Later that evening, as the party wound down, I stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The Florida night was warm, stars speckling the dark sky above. I thought about the journey of the past 3 years, from the terrified woman who fled her home with a single suitcase to the person I was now. I thought about Nathan, possibly facing freedom soon, and wondered what kind of man would emerge from those prison gates. Would he truly have changed? Would we ever find a way to have a healthy relationship? I didn't know, and for the first time I was okay with that uncertainty. My story wasn't defined by Nathan anymore, or by Walter, or by any of the men who had tried to control and diminish me. My story was my own, complex, imperfect, but authentically mine. As I looked up at the stars, I felt a profound sense of peace. At 70 years old, I wasn't ending my story. I was just beginning to write the most authentic chapters. Tomorrow would be another day of work at the organization, another opportunity to transform my pain into purpose, my experience into guidance for others, another day of living fully, freely, fearlessly. The door opened behind me, and Rebecca stepped out, offering me a glass of champagne. "A toast," she said, raising her own glass. "To new beginnings." I smiled, thinking of all the meanings those 2 simple words now held for me. "To new beginnings," I agreed, "and to the courage to create them." What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below and share the city you're watching from. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring journeys of transformation. Here are 2 other stories that are channel favorites. My daughter-in-law humiliated me at the family dinner until I revealed who really owned the house. After 40 years of marriage, I discovered my husband's secret bank account with millions.